Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I don't know what time it is that you're listening to this, but I do know now it is time to tune in. Welcome to another episode of the Pineapple Quest. I'm your host, Nyoxani, and together we're going to have a blast. Today's episode is a conversation with our guest Karsten and I, and we're going to touch on the ideas revealed by a movement called the Situationists International. They were prominent in the 60s, and they criticized the way we consume. So we're going to touch on that, and without further ado, let's jump into the interview. Cheers.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thank you for the invite.
I'm glad you're here, man. It's the second time we're meeting, and you're already open to do a podcast. So
yeah, I'm curious where the conversation is leading us. I think we have an interesting topic prepared, and honestly, it doesn't have a closed ending. So there's a lot of different ways we can go. I'm excited for it.
It's a little journey. So Karsten, I met you in a fashion store, right? So fashion is a part of your life.
A big part.
A big part.
Yeah.
Tell the audience maybe a bit what's up? You're into fashion. I heard photography as well. And there was another thing I forgot. I think marketing, right?
So basically, I'm a student at the Amsterdam Fashion Institute. I'm studying fashion and branding, which is basically a form of communication design. For me, I think the fashion part is more important than the branding part.
Okay.
I've been into fashion since I've been very young.
How young, if I may ask?
Yeah, I think the first few things that I've noticed, like age 11, and then when I was 16, I started making my first money with it. So I dabbled into it quite quickly. But currently, as you said, doing photography, fashion photography. I've done marketing before, a couple jobs, freelancing. And I'm trying to still test out where things are going. I'm open to everything. I think you have to move based on your options. So if something arises, I'm open to learn. And if I like this better than what I'm doing now, I'm able to change. But photography is the way to go right now.
There we go. Lovely. That mentality is also what got you here to the podcast.
That's right.
You said you made your first money with it at a young age?
Yeah. Like a lot of people have that way of getting into it. I think currently, like this entire resale culture is really big.
Like you mean resale in the sense like Supreme and flipping clothing?
Exactly.
And stuff. Okay.
That's how it started. For most of these guys that I've been talking to that are now maybe into the avant-garde direction of fashion, they all said like it started with Jordans or it started with Supreme or whatever. It's a natural entry-level drug, where you first see like a person that you think has a certain type of attitude wearing something, and you're like, this is an indicator for something bigger. And then you go down that rabbit hole and you buy your first Supreme piece. You wear it for a while. You actually realize that you just bought it for the brand. You sell it again to buy another one, and you see you can make a bit of money with that. Quickly, you realize you're getting more from it than you're spending, and you can go to different stages of the fashion that you're actually interested in.
All right. You can go to different stages of the fashion you're interested in.
Man. It's a full spectrum. It's a full spectrum, I'm telling you.
It's like, see, I personally, like, I was never big into brand fashion, like a bit, don't get me wrong. I enjoy a few brands, but it's like, I discovered like thrifting and like getting secondhand stuff. But like, we all have those days where we're like, oh, okay, I need money. What can I do? And then you just go on YouTube and like, okay, how can I earn money? And then like the second video that pops up is like, hey man, start flipping Supreme. And then you go in Supreme and then it's like, oh shit, like the website is like full of not bots, but like, bots basically, like the queues and the people and like the demand is so high. So impressive that at a young age, as a teenager, you said, right?
Yeah, but it sounds maybe more impressive than it is. You know? Yeah, I think it comes naturally,
humble flex.
No, it's just like for us, like I started doing this with a friend of mine, and I was lucky enough to do an exchange here. And when I arrived there, I met this kid who was dressing like me, and we were like looking at each other like,
hey,
I see you. And we were both into this like Japanese way of dressing.
Yeah.
At that time, Babe was big. And like Needless Japan, like a couple brands that were cheaper in Japan than in the US, and because we really wanted to get that stuff, we figured out a way to get it from Japan and started selling it to our classmates who were like, they're dressing kind of nice, you know?
Yeah.
And then to this day, I'm in contact with this guy, and I do the buying and he does the distribution, where I don't really have to worry about selling it, but I'm a bit of a curator. And
Curator in the sense like putting things together, or
yeah, more like I've been doing this now for a while, and I kind of know which things get picked up on from the trend, and then I buy into them. I have a couple bots that I work with, as you said. Like, these days not anymore too much with bots, but like if sales season hits or whatever comes where I see an opportunity, I buy into something, and he helps me to distribute it because he's a bit touched in with the Los Angeles fashion scene.
like in LA. So so you're operating from Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Something in the US.
Most of the time, I don't even get to see the product, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a globalized world right there. Right? That's impressive. So, okay, so that's been like on the fashion side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's been like also marketing side of things, I could say, right? Because like I mean, distributing, curating stuff, and like finding a target audience.
Yeah, with marketing, it's a bit different. So since I started studying branding, I think, like as I said, it's like visual communication, and marketing is kind of like the overarching structure where information gets distributed in forms of magazines, images, Instagram, like social media, different forms of media channels. And marketing is just like understanding how to work these channels into your own favor. And then the photography or branding part would be to create the image that travels as an information through the channel. Last year I did a specialization on marketing, and I helped some people here in Amsterdam with a shoe brand called Sign and Cosign for doing it. I did another project with a bespoke shoemaker as well, and then just like consultancy on a couple things.
Consultancy, like on fashion, basically.
Yeah,
So,
basically.
like, people come to you and say like, "Hey, this outfit." What you say, and you're like, "This T-shirt, like you should change that up," or how does that work?
Yeah,
'Cause
a
I've
bit
heard
different.
of consultancy, but
Yeah.
never heard it like in the fashion style of things.
Basically, like there's very different forms of consultancy, right? And for marketing consultancy, you're basically just presenting different options on how the brand could be operating in order to present themselves in a light that they would like to stand in. You do a bit of brand positioning. You do a bit of like how to increase engagement. And from what you've learned, either in school or outside of school, honestly, in school you don't learn that much. You only learn that you have to teach yourself. You kind of present them with different options on how to increase their following or their engagement, whatever they want to. Some brands don't even want to increase their engagement, but they want to solidify the engagement. So there's different ways on helping somebody to establish a connection to their customer that they would like to have.
Wow, that's quite a lot, right?
I'm talking a lot.
No,
man.
I respect that. That's amazing. That's exactly what we have this podcast for. Like just like bringing together different experiences and perspectives and forms of knowledge and establish
I think
a conversation.
marketing is going to be a bigger topic today.
Definitely, this was this was an amazing grounds for what's about to come. Basically, so we met in this fashion store in Amsterdam. Am I allowed to say the name? Probably not, right?
It's Comme des Garçons.
Comme des Garçons, all right. So we're allowed to say it. And so we had a quick chat and a little conversation, and we exchanged Instagrams. And as one does, one day I was like scrolling through my Instagram feed because that app is very addictive, eh? And I clicked on your story and I saw you had this picture of like many people with sunglasses staring at something or like some interesting glasses, and you had a quote underneath, and I was like, oh wow, this looks interesting. What's happening here? So I texted you. I was like, yo, what's happening here? And the term that is associated with the picture you posted is Situationism International, correct?
Yeah. Exactly.
And like, do you want to give us a small introduction?
So just as you did, I stumbled across it at the same time. I was reading a book about a guy called Malcolm McLaren.
Okay.
I was interested in him because he was for a time the partner of Vivienne Westwood, a designer that those who are tuning in, who are into fashion, probably know. And he is a multidisciplinary creator. Kind of an interesting story behind him. And in the time that he went to art school, he joined this movement that I think is a bit fascinating, which we're going to talk about today, called the Situationists.
Okay.
And they had an overarching group that they called SI, Situationalists International, which then was the official term for that movement, where they tried to incorporate many movements of the time into one manifesto. And the picture that I posted was actually the book cover of that manifesto, called The Spectacle of the Society.
The Spectacle of the Society. Wasn't that the book written by Guy Debord?
Exactly.
Yeah, Guy Debord.
Yeah.
Who, so after I like stumbled across your Instagram story, and I knew we were gonna talk this and unpack this a bit in a podcast, I did my little Google researches, and Guy Debord seems to be like the guy of this movement of Situationalism International.
Yeah, exactly.
From what I understood, like they started in the end of the 50s, right?
Exactly, 1957 they were founded. And it was honestly just a short time, and it's also, despite them having a manifesto and despite them having an official name and like people that joined the movement, it's a bit all over the place. They're trying to bind things together, but it's a very diverse philosophy behind it that takes into account art movements like Dadaism and Surrealism, but also political thoughts such as anarchism and Marxism. Like the manifesto is kind of built up on the Marxist manifesto, where they acknowledge a lot of the things that Marx and Engels said, but then said that society ever since has changed, and they add a few things onto it or change it into their own perspective. So it's a movement that is actually like, it is an avant-garde movement which mixes arts and political philosophy together.
So for those who don't know what avant-garde means, because that includes me, what does avant-garde mean?
that's a term to define. That's probably really difficult, but I've thought about this once. Give me a second.
I mean, avant means like before in French, right? And garde is
honestly, I would probably lean in too far in trying to define what avant-garde is, but it's basically art movements that try to break the conventional understanding of what art is, you know.
All right. So basically, like breaking the paradigm, changing the way things are done. So, all right. So this you could say stew of different influences, right, which emerged, let's say, in Paris in the 50s and lasted until I think the early 70s or the end of the 60s.
Exactly.
What was their main contribution? What was their main point? Because like they had something to say, and I think it's very relevant to what we experience today.
Exactly. I think it is. I think that's why we should have this discussion, even though this part is very specific. I hope we open it up later on, so we can also project it to what's happening right now. Basically, they said in this world that we're living in right now, which is so driven by consumerism, most of our needs are taken care of. And we find ourselves in a position where we have everything that we need, but we created a new need of creating new markets to find new desires. So actually all of our desires are fulfilled, but our new desire is to kind of have like a belonging, an identity that is created by an image that we represent of ourselves, which makes us then like chase for letting us represent in a certain way. This could be reflected, for example, by like an example that all of us know, that people who go to Starbucks to study usually have a MacBook, you know, and this is like a typical archetype of a person that wants to like represent something of themselves. There's very different ways of doing that. When I came to Amsterdam, I found out that the ballers in the city drive a bicycle called Van Moof, like an electric bicycle.
Fun move. That's like the who in the city? The port?
The ballers.
The ballers. Oh yeah, that's for sure.
In Germany, like both of us are from there, we would laugh about somebody that thinks of himself as a baller who's driving a bike, you know?
But here, fun move is a thing, man. It's like if you've got a fun move, it's like, ooh,
yeah,
you live it. You live it.
It is a nice bike. I can't say anything against it, but it's like, so basically we have these indicators that are creating an image for ourselves. That have become more important than the reality behind it. So if we buy a new MacBook, we don't think about we're needing that technology behind it, but more like we're the people who have that new MacBook, you know. Or if we buy a bike, it's not like we're actually getting quicker to work, but we're the people who are seen on that bike, and that's kind of what the spectacle is. It's like this thing that you can buy into of an image that is represented of yourself.
That is what the spectacle is as a whole, basically, the society or the option?
So we basically enforce the spectacle upon us against each other. So by validating that claim towards each other, like let's say somebody who's really into watches buys an Audemars Piguet watch or some like niche brand watch, and some other guy who's into watches is like wow, that's a nice watch. You must be into that type of stuff. We are reinforcing the thoughts onto each other by recognizing what we created, you know.
So picking up on what you just said, basically the things, or let's say the consumption of a product shifts from serving necessarily a function to serving an image, right? Or let's say to us identifying or attaining a certain image, right? So for example, I'll use the iPhone as an example, right? But like say you buy an iPhone, and that many customers don't necessarily buy the iPhone because it's, let's say, it works fast, or like I'm not a phone geek, I don't know, but let's say the technical details of the phone are like that they're so good or fast, but it's more about the image of owning that product. Is that correct? So the image has become more important than the function itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned that I had a marketing course before, and that way of thinking is actually getting pushed up on us for those who want to go into the marketing direction. We call this in marketing consumer tribes. So
consumer tribes.
Yeah, consumer tribes, which is basically like a group of people that identify as a culture, and they have these indicators that showcase that they're into the same thing. Like let's say when it comes to music, or let's say somebody who's into skating probably wears their jeans a little bit lower, might wear a beanie in the summer. These are things that are indicators of him being part of a culture, of a group. And in marketing, we learn to identify these things, and then also how to create product that fits into the identification of a certain group. So we're actually getting part of the spectacle.
All right. So you're basically tuning into the need of a person or a group having a certain image.
Yeah.
Being like seen in a certain way.
Yeah.
And selling them a product. When I was preparing for this podcast, I was wondering, like, okay, this is it makes sense because like a lot of advertisements, like they sell the experience, like, oh my god, like you know, drink this drink and you're having an amazing summer, like, and it's like what is advertised has nothing to do with the product. Like, but it's like, oh, all of a sudden you're a cool person because you have these pair of shoes, or you not listen to this, but like you consume this product, right? And I was thinking like, okay, but like, why is it so, right? Because like I mean, a lot of products, they have a lot of value in the sense of like they have an amazing function, right? So a lot of high tech phones, laptops, they have a very good function, right? But like, why is it that we're advertising them for things that are like not necessarily functional.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, because like I came up with not a potential, not solution, but like thinking, okay, this is how it could happen. But I'm curious to hear what you think before I embark on that.
Like obviously I had to look into this,
Of course.
but I'm curious of yours maybe first. Maybe I just want to see where it led you. You know.
So what I thought, but this was just my own thinking, is that if you advertise a product just because of its function, you'll only reach the people who care about the function, right? So, as I said, I personally, like, I'm not the most geek when it comes to technology stuff. So, depending on like how fast the processor of my phone is, it doesn't really matter to me, right? So the clients you'd like catch, or so to say, or like attract by like focusing on the function, is limited to the people who already care about it, right? But once you tap into like identity and image and like emotions and like the desire of belonging to a place or like a group, or like being perceived as a certain persona, then all of a sudden your market is just way bigger. You know, all of a sudden, like, somebody who doesn't necessarily care about the function, but is like, oh, I actually like the status that comes with the product, right? Or the way people look at you with the product.
Exactly.
So that was the only rationale. I was like, okay, this is probably why, or not why, but this could be a explanation why.
Exactly, and it's right. It's absolutely right. What is also a conclusion from what you said is then, if it fits the way that I see myself, then the value is also higher. Because I think the reason why we promote these things in that way is because these days there's basically a product that solves every solution. No, a product that solves every problem, like a solution for a problem. So let's say we want to buy headphones. We can probably go to Amazon and just rank headphones from the cheapest to the most expensive one and buy maybe the cheapest. And if we feel too cheap about ourselves, we buy the second cheapest, you know? So if you're just advertising something based on like, I have a solution for your problem, then you're going to be in this competition of like, who's having the cheapest price. So there's a lot of people then competing for that spot of like, we all solve the same solution, or we all solve the same problem for that. We provide the solution for the same problem, so we're in a competition, and now it's just a question of like, who can provide it as cheap as possible, so that the consumer picks the cheapest one. And if you don't want to be part of that competition, you have to offer something else. So, like you say about headphones, there's Bose headphones, which are like German headphones, nicely stylized, and they have a certain type of sound. I think it's called
the image of quality as well. Right?
Yeah. I think it's called candy sound, which is enhancing like bass and the high-pitched stuff, so that hip-hop and pop music gets like more enjoyable while listening to it. So they already said like, for the people who are not just looking for a quick solution for their problem, but who want to look stylish and listen to that type of music, we're offering a separate product. But then we're not part of this competition, and we can ask for a higher price. So if you want to make some money in the creative industry, offering a solution that's different, you always have to like separate yourself and include a form of identity with it.
Interesting. So, touching on like image and like identities, I find it super interesting, because like I was standing in a fashion. Nah, never mind. It's just water.
Of course, this happens.
You want some of mine?
All good.
Oh, good. So I was standing in a fashion store in Amsterdam, and there was this 16-year-old boy, and he was putting on this shirt, right? And like the shirt cost like around like 70 euros or something, and the shirt was basic. There was nothing on it. It was just the logo. And I was wondering, like what's happening here? Like, it's what's happening? Like, your mom is gonna pay 70 euros for this shirt, you know? And we've got this 16, 17-year-old, like feeling really like hyped. Like, oh, you could see the joy in his face. Like, I got this shirt now, you know? Like, it's, and like it left me wondering. I was like, because like it's obvious that the company is not selling the design, because I have no experience in designing fashion. I can do that too.
But yeah, that is the point of the situationalists. They're saying we're losing touch of reality and valuing like an abstraction of it. So that 16-year-old boy was not seeing like a nice cut or a nice silhouette or a better fabric, but he was seeing a logo that's a representation of a brand image. And quickly, before starting this podcast, we mentioned that it's a development that we've been seeing all around the world, where instead of valuing the technical aspect behind it, we value the abstraction behind it. So in art, we saw this shift from a very realistic way of painting with people like Goyard, turning into Goya, turning into the abstract form of painting, with Pablo Picasso first, who was able to draw a very realistic painting, but decided not to, and decided to have like a representation that is very simple of what he wanted to draw, turn into something where the art students only learned how to draw abstract things, and they couldn't even draw the highly technical Goyard anymore, like realistic.
So basically, you say there's a loss in skill.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, was back in the days, you still had to be able to draw, let's say, very detailed, realistic appearances. And then, people who engaged in, let's say, modern art were still able to do that. But now people just learn modern art from the get-go.
Exactly. And same is happening in fashion, you know? Like, all of a sudden, these screen-printed T-shirts from, like, influential figures like Virgil Abloh, they take...
dangerous ground.
Like they take for his first series of product, he had a brand called Pyrex Vision. He took a Gildan shirt, which is worth €5, and put his spray painting on it, and all of a sudden it was worth 180. You know, it's not that the T-shirt is getting better, but the idea behind it and the creator behind it makes it that much more valuable, because the abstract thought that is like a symbol on the T-shirt is valuable to the person instead of the cut of the T-shirt. Yeah. But it's everywhere. I'm not trying to criticize Abloh.
No. I personally don't know much about him. I just know that there's like people who love him and then people who don't love him.
Yeah.
But like Abloh is like...
No, he's a legend. Rest in peace.
But it's it's an interesting development. And so you say, like, to a certain extent, you say that's a problem.
I do think so. I think... especially here in the West, we're getting taught to only, create like concepts and ideas instead of actually being able to translate it. And then we usually have an idea and we send it out to a manufacturer in China, and they're actually able to translate it, into like a product that is actually being developed over there. But I think it's a great loss. Yeah, I do think so. And that's what they pointed out as well. We're losing touch of reality. We're paying that much money without getting a better product.
But when you say you're losing touch of reality, like, reality is such a big word, and like we could go all Matrix on this one. But when you say like losing touch of reality, what do you mean in the sense, like in the reality of, let's say, quality standards of the clothing? Because the shirt the 16-year-old guy bought for €70 with just the logo on the chest, it's still real, it's like a real shirt, and he walks out and thinks he's the guy, he's like, oh yeah, I got it, so like that is a reality. But like, so like I'm just curious to like see what is that the situationalists are pointing at, and what you're pointing at, like the losing touch part is
so they at a later stage, they became really interested in urbanism and into architecture as well, which is probably like the most long-lasting term of design. And
wow, I never thought about that actually.
Yeah.
Like design changes so fast, but architecture, it stays basically. Once the building is there, it's there.
Exactly. And then I think an architect has to be very considerate with what he's developing, because it will stay at least 40 years, right? And we've come to a point where architects these days are not really considering anymore the experience of the person living in the house, but more what he tries to represent with living in there. So people are living in modernist houses, not really feeling comfortable with the sharp edges and the raw textures of the house, you know. As a preparation for this talk, I had 2 houses as examples, where one is just representing a way of thinking, and the other one is actually thinking about how a person is experiencing the space. I think it's the big problem of design at this stage, because as a client, if you would approach me, for example, for my photography, and you would say, like, I'm trying to shoot this campaign for a marketing thing for my shoes, and I would immediately tell you, this is how it's supposed to look like, you should not hire me. Because I would then just create a representation of what I think you are, instead of actually thinking about what your needs are. If we have a dialogue first, where both of us point out the important things for this campaign to work out, and after that I figure out a way on how to make these needs into a picture, then I would say hire me. But if I just work on a representation, then it's not really like the actual use of it is not really considered.
Not considered. But the interesting thing is when we like touch back to the example you just gave with the photographer, right, and the representation part, is that when like the hire me or don't hire me example, people are hiring these brands. You know, like that kid went into that store and bought that shirt. You know? You flipped Supreme shirts, you know, like the demand is there, so people are hiring this trend, these companies, these abstracts, you know, of like trying to belong to, let's say, a consumer tribe, as you mentioned it earlier. So like that's what I find interesting. It's like okay, like it seems to be, there seems to be a demand for it, or there seems to be like a human need or desire. I don't know.
Maybe I should make a distinction between like if you would hire me as a photographer, and then you would probably, or as an architect or as a product designer, whatever it is, then you are getting a custom-made product made for your desires. If I go into a store and buy a shirt, it's not really custom for me, but I buy into a vision of somebody. And I think if you're one of the best and you're operating on that level, then people just want to buy in your vision. That's also fine, you know. But if you want to make something innovative, something new, then you should have a different understanding each time you acquire something. With a ready-made product like a clothing article, that's not possible. Obviously, no. But yeah, like let's say you're a businessman trying to have like like you're selling cars, and I'm trying to create a campaign for you in order to reach customers that are interested particularly in your cars. Then I shouldn't have an immediate understanding of how I'm going to portray these cars for your customers. But we have to have a discussion first where I can then apply my knowledge to your demands. And we create something new.
That actually addresses, let's say, the audience and my needs as a, let's say, client, like your client in this case. But so what I find interesting is that, I mean, the situationalists or people like situationalists, they see a problem in that. They say like, this is not really good, right? So I read that they said like, okay, it's the everyday life becomes very monotonous, right? And like and it becomes boring to a certain extent, which becomes to a certain extent empty as well. Similar to the consumerist, let's say, criticism, just that on top of the consumerist criticism, they say that it's not only just about consumption anymore, it's about the image as well. So everybody just cares about appearances and the image, right?
So they are basically experiencing a city as a very monotone place to live. And they say everybody moves to these cities for opportunities of finding work. But they don't see the reason to find work just to buy products that represent a fake identity.
These guys were up to something. Eh?
Yeah, I think they were. And I think most people are like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, especially here in Amsterdam, where living is kind of expensive, people come to the point where they pay so much for their apartment that they don't own their apartment, but the apartment owns them. And they have to keep on working just to maintain that living cost, you know? So they say, like, no, fuck that. Like, listen, your identity is not formed by what you buy, and it's more about the experience of life than about ownership of a product that makes you who you are. So they don't confine to that idea of a 9-to-5 job just in order to create this fake identity of yourself.
But don't they, like, when you say fake identity, like, that also clearly plays into, let's say, the image that the consumption of the goods, so to say, creates, right? Because the image is like the identity, the fake identity is created through the image associated with the consumption of certain goods, right? And so they came up with an interesting solution from what I read. They were like, we're going to go for a walk.
So they basically said, we're not considering play, you know?
We're not considering what?
Play. Like playing with each other, which is most natural form of a human being to actually live. Like as children, we all have that, but then we get jobs and we stop caring about that, and we fall into this mundane way of living that just maintains to acquire things that are representing who we are supposed to be. And they had this idea of drifting, which is a way of like not performance art, but a participatory art, where it's not about like what you are seeing you're supposed to be interested in, but what you're doing is supposed to make you more interesting. Where they had maps of the city where people should walk in random ways to the city. They could walk for days. They could also just walk for a couple minutes to spots that they have never been to. And that was supposed to create a bit more of a randomness and a bit more of a play that gives you an insight onto, I've experienced something new today. So you would do a walk like that to the city, to places that you've never visited, and then reflect upon it later on. It's like, what have I seen today? Who have I engaged with? And they would take it further sometimes, where they're like, we go to a certain space in order to find one person or find one connection or one conversation, just like we are doing right now, where we just stroll to the city and we approach somebody with the question, are you the person that I'm looking for? And then they have a conversation that is kind of random. That randomness was important for them. And I think it's kind of beautiful.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just like, you can have the most interesting reactions out of that. Like, are you the person that I'm looking for?
Yeah.
It can be the beginning of a love story or like I don't know, a jail trial.
Exactly. You could meet a psychopath. Yeah. No, for sure.
But no, that's so basically breaking the monotonous everyday lives through engaging in play and, so to say, randomness.
Yeah.
And just like through going on these walks as well.
How it started was one of the founders of the SI saw a graduate project of this college student who mapped out every walk he did for an entire year, and he saw that it's basically a triangle in the city, and the 3 points that he would commute to on a regular basis were his home, the place where he studied, the art academy, and his piano teacher. And when looking at this, this guy who's part of the movement was shocked. He was like, "This is a really mundane life. Like, this is a very it makes me sad just looking at it."
And this is an art student, okay? Like we expect art students to have among the most like crazy, but you know, like being outside of the box already, like, you know.
But think about it, like how many places that you frequently visit are also in the triangle structure.
It's horrible. I remember when I moved to Amsterdam, everybody's like, "Oh my God, you live in Amsterdam now? And how is it? Like, what have you seen?" And I was like, well, to be honest, I've seen 3 things, you know, like I've been to uni, I've been home, and then my friend's place.
Yeah.
Everything is so expensive, so you like, as a student, you like try to not spend too much. So yeah, I had a triangle. Yeah. Sometimes it was a square, but it was mostly a triangle.
And that's their point. I mean, they're Marxists, so they're trying to offer solutions that don't cost anything. Yeah. And then they're like, let's have a walk and interact with some people on a random basis, and let's try to find points in the city where we can play without paying anything for it. Yeah. And yeah, as you say, it's probably for me also 3 points.
3 points.
Like a triangle. And I think these days it's even worse because we find so much entertainment online that we don't even have these 3 triangles that we visit all the time, you know?
The triangle becomes smaller. It's like toilet, kitchen, and bed, you know? But
that's probably for some people the case.
But during quarantine for sure. But what I find so interesting is that this group, the Situationists International, they emerged in the 50s, right? Mm-hmm. So this was like Europe was like freshly industrialized, and like consumerism was ramping up. People were consuming more goods, right? And they came up with these ideas which are so relevant today. Mm-hmm. Like, so today, if we think about it, like creating an image, social media is one big image factory, you know. Yeah. Like and the interesting thing is that we're the ones creating the images of ourselves and the way we want to be perceived. But like we can touch on social media in a bit. But what I found super interesting is that they emerged in the 50s, created thoughts that are super relevant for today, but they disappeared in the 70s and the early 70s. Right? Yeah. And which made me wonder is like how can a movement that has basically is pointing out to something that's actually crucial and relevant to society just fade away? Yeah. You know, like how can that happen? Like is it did they maybe not offer enough of a solution? You know, or
yeah. Honestly, I have to say, whoever was working on that, you didn't do the best job. Social media is your worst nightmare, and it's more relevant than ever. Yeah. Also, with that randomness that we talked about, these algorithms are predicting us everything. Basically, there's no randomness to that interaction that we're having, and we're portraying a version of ourselves that is not really ourselves. It's again an abstraction, you know. It's not reality. Yeah, I have to say, like something happened, or must have happened, that we went all the way into the different direction. But what I can say is that Guy Debord, who was like the head of the movement,
what's his name?
Guy Debord.
Guy Debord, yeah. I understood Peter Bohr. I was like, who's Peter?
He tried to create that manifesto for them, and that manifesto was basically trying to incorporate different ways and different movements into one way of thinking and one way of living. Yeah. And I think at a certain point he kept on adding on new thoughts to the manifesto. The manifesto was not changed, but he had a new understanding where, for example, all of a sudden art became something consumerist, despite them being an art movement, and parts of the movement who were just there for the artistic side kind of had to leave because of that. And at the beginning of the 70s, he came to a point where he kicked almost everybody out and was there by himself, and that was that. You know?
So our man was leading a randomness group, and it didn't survive the randomness within the group, so to say. And the group succumbed to its own randomness, or succumbed is a bit dramatic, but like it's difficult.
There's also 2 other points where they were anarchists and Marxists. So the anarchist part was just basically we're rebels without a cause, you know. Yeah. So they had something to fight against, but they didn't have a solution really. Yeah. Which at a certain point you have to realize, like we're not really making any progress here.
It's like, yeah, guys, it was fun, but let's fix it.
Exactly. And they went really far. Like for those who are interested, I think the most famous event was the May 68, where there were huge protests in Paris, but also London, all across Europe, but also Japan, where people were just like turning the streets into like their playground. Like exactly. Like they wanted to have that interaction of like they built like like they turned over cars for people to have like a maze to go through and stuff like that. It was crazy. Like people were actually like way more like engaged in these protests than we could probably believe. And then the Marxist side is in Paris during that time, which was the place where these ideas found most of the resonance. There was a real intellectual niche for people who were still very much communists. Like we talked about the existentialist movements. These people had to realize at a certain point that the UdSSR and all the communist states had not really done a good job of executing on the ideas of Marx and Engels. And first, I mean, it took them a very long time to realize that it's not the way to go. But there were a couple books that all of a sudden came from the Soviet Union of people who had experienced the system that were accepted by these left-leaning intellectuals. And then even these left-leaning intellectuals had to realize that communism and Marxism is not really the way to go, and it actually killed a lot of people.
In the form executed in the UdSSR.
Yeah.
Crazy. But so you have, let's say, the anarchists who realize like they're basically turning up on the streets, like flipping cars and creating randomness. And then you have, let's say, the intellectual left-leaning niche, let's say, in Paris, engaging with these topics. But what I ask myself is that, like, they point out to these, like, really crucial issues of, let's say, being attached to, let's say, the images or, like, the monotony of, let's say, modern day life. But at the same time, it's like, I think, but this is just my thought, maybe they didn't survive because they didn't provide a system, like a functioning system. But at the same time, it's like, how do you want to systemize randomness? Because then it's not random anymore.
Yeah.
You know? Like, that's something that's still puzzling me. But there's another question I have. Is so like, as we just heard, you engaged in these topics. You've read about the Situationists International, and you're in marketing. You know, like so you engage with this on a daily basis, basically, right? You engage with fashion. You work for like fashion companies and like
I'm part of the problem.
Like,
like, and I have to say, I wish they would be a bit more persuasive in what they did back there in the 60s, because I think they're absolutely right in some of the things they said.
What do you mean with persuasive?
Like we say, it's a very relevant topic, because in this day and age of social media, we are also suffering from the consequences of it, and these ideas that are getting pushed by marketing are kind of false gods, that we're following. Like we
false gods.
Yeah, like we create like these ideals that we're trying to be, and we're trying to buy into this lifestyle. We're trying to buy coolness. We're trying to buy attitude or whatever. Well, you cannot buy these things, and that's the reason why I wanted to come here for this podcast, because I strongly believe that what you're consuming is not you. And so many people have that understanding of like, I wear this pair of sneakers, therefore I am this type of person, and I think that is not you. In the movie Fight Club, there's a scene where the camera starts shaking, and Brad Pitt is speaking into the camera, and he's like, you are not your cargo pants, or you are not like your car. And that is very true. But you will realize quickly that if you talk to your friends, they kind of build an understanding of themselves based on what they buy into, even if it's just a club that they go to. That's part of their identity.
But this reminds me of like, what was this guy's name song? Like, the rapper that stole the Grammy from Kendrick Lamar. Macklemore.
Yeah,
there was a huge debate about it. He didn't steal it, by the way, but like everybody was like, Kendrick should have put Kendrick on it. It was like either to Pimp a Butterfly or Macklemore's project, and I was like, heavy times. But so Macklemore, he had this one song about like, I think it was like where he talks about his Nikes, like
Yeah.
You know the song?
Yeah. I know.
I wanna fly, can you take me far?
That one right there. Yeah, exactly.
And then like, and he finishes with like, oh, just another pair of shoes. So when you were speaking, like, it reminded me of this song, right?
It's crazy that you bring that up. It brings back memories, bro.
It was good times.
Yeah.
Macklemore was fun, man. Not gonna lie. Like it was. He had.
Still,
But
that Grammy belongs to Kendrick.
100%. Oh, new album, by the way. Game changer. Game
really
changer.
good.
That album needs a whole episode.
That one was really good.
That was avant-garde if we use it in the sense of like paradigm shifting. By the way, I don't necessarily know the term correctly, but just that's how I feel it. But this is an amazing transition, by the way. So we have Macklemore pointing out the problem of like consumerism, right? Through this song where he sings about the Nike shoes, right? And so basically, to a certain extent, society has reached a point that we slowly realize, like, wow, we can't, like, we're not really always happy when we buy into, let's say, these brands, right? So you have that consciousness, and then people like start like minimalism, like was trending on Instagram. People were like buying less, or not buying less, but necessarily buying more conscious and stuff. But what I find so interesting is that, or like thrifting, for example, and Macklemore is a perfect example because he had a whole song about thrift stores, like, just about thrifting. But through a certain way, it has become about the image again. You know, it's like, oh, I'm a minimalist, or this hoodie, I thrifted it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And it's like I feel like we're trapped in this sort of like chasing the image thing because
it is like, horrible. Yeah,
because I was like damn, because I was like, oh yeah, like I don't follow that. I thrift my clothing. I was shit, like this.
The minimalist thing is such a good example. I have to say. It's. I was dating this girl who was just like that. She was like, yeah, I'm going the minimalist route, so I bought this and this and this. And I was like, no way. Okay. I like at the beginning of Corona, I thought we reached peak consumerism and like the pendulum's going to bounce into the other direction from now on.
What made you think that?
I guess I was wrong, you know? But people were getting more introspective. I think there was a big thing, like a big trend towards spirituality and mindfulness and minimalism, like as you said, like there was a contra movement where people realized like this shit is not making us happy. So I thought like it's time to change. Hopefully it is. Hopefully we reach the peak, but I don't really see it changing at the moment.
Well, I mean, on the one side, I think it's a very natural need for humans to like identify, right? Like it's like you said.
But to own, I'm not sure.
I don't know if it's natural, but it's practical. But it's like, I mean, the thing is that, I mean, I'm personally, I don't think ownership is necessarily bad if it permits ownership for others as well to a certain extent, right? So that like just like by you owning something doesn't exclude other people's from owning stuff as well, right?
I think our generation is more into access than into ownership, you know? We talk about a shared economy with people using BlaBlaCar to get from point A to B.
You use BlaBlaCar?
I have not used it yet.
You've never used it?
Airbnb, I used that a lot of times, and it's also like access to having a place to stay instead of like owning a place to stay or whatever. And there's plenty of these examples, like with Uber as well. Like these small scooters that we have in the city, Felix and Check. I think there's a bit of a change of like we don't need to have ownership anymore, but it's like a shared economy. That
is definitely changing. What I ask myself though is that is the point the Situationists International make solved then though? Like because the thing is like I'm like posting a picture from my Airbnb is like still creating that image, you know. And that's where,
and you paid for it too, so it's also not serving the Marxism point, you know.
So it's I don't know, it's a complicated one, but what I wanted to tap into earlier is that all these counter movements can be monetized or like made as an abstract idea, right? So
Yeah,
let's say
very much so.
you can create the image of being a how do you say that, a situationalist international by, let's say, posting a picture of you reading the book.
Yeah.
So you're creating that image of yourself.
Yeah.
So I think
Shit, that's me right there.
like yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. You created the image.
Yeah.
You creating the image of yourself is like why we're sitting here.
Yeah.
Right? So it is a form of communication, and it's not necessarily bad, like per se, because we're exchanging interests, right?
Yeah.
We're having this conversation. We're connecting, right? Which is also, I think, why humans like signaling through, let's say, clothing. You know, like you signal maybe your ideology or your beliefs or your interest or your music style. You know, like I mean, like there's like streetwear, and then there's there's stereotypical outfits to, let's say, music genres. Right?
Yeah.
Like a heavy metal listener looks different than like a hip hop fanatic, right? So I think it's somewhere it's a human need to a certain extent, but
A sense of belonging.
but it has a lost proportion, or not proportion, but I feel like it's come to a level where I'm just like, it has become so abstract,
Yeah.
you know, where it's like, yeah, and
For
like
sure.
so, as you mentioned earlier, detached from quote unquote reality, you know,
Yeah.
because like it's not about the fabric anymore, you know.
I think us young people especially struggle with that sense of belonging. Like the traditional structures of family are getting more and more loose, for example. So we don't really feel that sense of belonging anymore there. If we want to pursue a career, we usually go to a different city where then we kind of lose touch with the people we grew up around. So we also lose the sense of belonging there. And, you know, like being part of something requires commitment. And I think we have less and less commitment in our regular everyday interactions. So I think you're very right, and that's why we're trying to buy it back, because we don't
We're
really
trying to buy it back. Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to commit to commitment. We don't want to commit to certain situations, which is why I go to the store and buy Stussy. You know, like
Yeah.
it's I don't know. I fully agree with you. I just at the same time find it like difficult. Like
It's
so-
stupid.
so-
It's also
so-
empty. You know, it's so empty.
Yeah.
I agree. But like let's say the closest to like a structure where we felt a sense of belonging was maybe a religion. You know,
Yeah.
but that's also like losing it right now.
in
but
the Western world for sure.
Yeah.
I've never come to a place with less religious people than Amsterdam.
And I think actually the Netherlands is the
Is
country with the most what are they called?
Atheists.
Atheists. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean like Paradiso, the club, like is in a church building, or like it's like for those who are not from Amsterdam, there's a club that is in a former church building. And when I first saw that, I was like, this is.
It's a bit weird, but
I
kind of
like it, but
too.
I was like, I cannot tell my grandma, you know. I was like, grandma, like we went partying in the church, not in the way you think we did. But
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's wild for sure.
Yeah, but like in marketing, we learn then how to use these indicators of people who want to feel a sense of belonging and create a product that feeds into that need, you know? So let's say, like even like the place where you get your coffee, that cup of coffee kind of already represents who you are in a sense of like where you go for your coffee. But in fashion, it would be easier to describe it by, for example, a pair of Chuck Taylors or like Chucks, All Stars, or Dr. Martin sneakers, because as you said, these are typically cultural things. Timberlands would be also another form of shoes that are typically associated with hip hop.
I love Timbs, by the way.
Me too, absolutely. But then, like the Doc Martens are more of a punk thing, or maybe like an anarchist thing, and then the Chucks are more of a skater shoe. So these are indicators of a certain culture, and we're trying to feed into that. So if we say like we're trying to create a brand that skaters like, then we make them collaborate with Chuck Taylors.
But like on the one hand, it's like this could be interpreted in a way that is like super wholesome, because you could say like you're feeding into the need of a group and you're creating community, right? Like you could like build this whole narrative of like, you know, you're bringing people together, you're connecting them, and like people don't know where they belong anymore, and you're giving them a sense of belonging in forms of like their shirts, and you're giving them a uniform, how they can identify each other at the streets, like, oh hey, this might be a like-minded person, right? So you could frame it super positive, but you could also frame it super negative in the way where you're like, you know what, we're exploiting your need to belong somewhere, and I'm gonna make a lot of money out of it because this shirt in the production costs like 10 cents, but you're paying 100 euros, you know? So like it's like I'm still on the fence, like, and this is also what often a difficulty I have with capitalist critiques, where I'm just like, well, it's like it there's so much nuance to it. Like there's also like capitalism has a lot of bad features, right? At the same time, there is, let's say, certain dynamics that can be like spun in a positive narrative, right? Or that the fact that people buy it to a certain extent confirms that there is a certain interest or need that is being fulfilled through the consumption of the product.
Yeah. And I like that you shine light on that, because I'm not sure who's right. If that one side of like the pro-capitalist side is right, or of that situationalist side is right in that sense. Because coming here to a new city, the people that I hang around with right now, I probably met most of them because they were wearing something that I gave them a compliment for, you know? And then maybe just a point of interaction is the first point, and then you become friends on different things, like different attributes of theirs, but it does work. It does work.
It's a different form of socializing, so to say. That's wild. That's wild. But so, you know, we've spoken about, but no, we've touched about it briefly, but I'd be super curious to hear on your personal either experience or thoughts in, let's say, so this quote unquote being part of the problem, right? Because you said like, okay, you yourself engage in, let's say, flipping of clothing, right? So you buy shirts and you resell them, if I understood correctly, and like you study marketing, so you tailor products to consumer tribes, right? And I'd be super curious to hear like, okay, like to which extent do you want to incorporate, or like to which extent does the situationalist lens change your work, right? Or your perspective? Because like, I mean, you posted it, like you're thinking about it, you're engaging in it, like obviously you've read a lot on it, you know?
Yeah, but I think actually that the thoughts that they're having should be kind of obvious to most of us. I mean, we put it now in fancy terms, but they should be obvious to most of us. And I think this is a good point to wrap it up, where I can basically make a line below it and say like, whatever we do, our actions matter, and we do have responsibility. And everybody who's studying marketing also has a responsibility of how they use their power to communicate, because it is a power. And for whoever you work, make sure that you also support what they're doing, you know, because you're helping them and spreading their product. So yeah, think about where you apply, and use your power in the best way possible.
Lovely, man, lovely. I have two final notes.
Go ahead.
And then we're ready to wrap it up. One of them was like, do you incorporate any of the Situationists International insights in your everyday life? Like the randomness, did you break out of the triangle?
The randomness I do really love. I like that. That's one thing that I already like. Already before reading into it, that I really liked. Like let's say about fashion. Like I'm really into fashion, but I come from a small town where the only way to access it was through the internet. So all the pictures that I was seeing were basically from magazines and Tumblr, you know, and they were pre-curated by an algorithm or by somebody who had a good taste already. So I managed to establish a style that was basically a reflection of what I was seeing online. And when starting to work in a store that also sells really nice clothing, these people with very high levels of taste come in and they completely blow your mind. So I started seeing different silhouettes, different textures, and that was super influential. And that triggered a thought in me like like I've been shaped, you know, like all this algorithm stuff has completely like shaped the way that I think, has shaped the way that I dress, shaped the way that I form opinions on things.
The last question, then we can wrap it up for today, or like unless you have, let's say, something that's on your chest and you're burning, you know, fire, and you're like, this needs to go out to the world. Did you stumble upon the Situationists International at uni or through the marketing context?
No. They did present us with something similar, but I didn't. No, I was just reading this book out of interest for the guy Malcolm McLaren, who was part of them at a certain point. But no, at uni they have a thing which is a good documentary that they recommended to us. I will send it to you afterwards so you can link it. But it's basically about a person who was the first guy who invented public relations. I think his name is Bourneau. Edward Bourneau. And he kind of took psychology and Freud's psychology in order to influence the masses. They kind of showed us how easy it is to manipulate a large crowd of people through communication. And that is kind of like showing like the dark sides of marketing. So they did a little bit of that, and then in this marketing course we had a bit of a intellectual discussion which nobody really participated in what can actually happen through marketing and how it's kind of like fucking up our consumption and so we did have some of that.
So like there is a consciousness in the study. Amazing. Do you have any words or any messages, any shout outs you want to get out there before we wrap this podcast up?
First of all, I would say thank you for your attention, for whoever's joining in, and thank you for the invitation as well. And maybe go ahead and try to go through this world with a bit of a different lens than the one that is given to you by consumerist marketing. If you like this, go ahead.
Lovely. Karsten, it's been a great pleasure. Thanks a lot for joining.
Thank you.
I learned a lot. We touched on a lot on the Situationists International, Situationism International, and the effects of society about the group, its movements, and our impressions today. It was a lovely conversation. I hope the listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this second episode of the Pineapple Quest. And hope to see you very soon. And cheers. Cheers, man.